wisdom attend, let us hear the Holy Gospel. Peace be to all.
And to thy spirit.
The reading of the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke.
Glory to thee, O Lord. Glory to thee.
Let us attend. The Lord spoke this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that falls to me." And he divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in that country, and he began to be in want. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father. I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to make merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what this meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound.' But the son was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Lo, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a fatted calf that I might make merry with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'"
Glory to thee, O Lord. Glory to thee.
Good morning. I want to thank Christy Chaburu, who has stepped up to the plate. She is the third director. The first is flat on his back, had an epidural, and we pray that he will be relieved of pain enough to travel home back to be with us. And William Grundler is on a job assignment, and Michael Paraskivas is on a job assignment. So we thank Christy. If not, Father Minas will serve, and I will go and direct the choir. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Christ is in our midst. So I'm a basso profondo today. I'm feeling fine. It's just that things are going around, so you have to be careful. For the past 3 Sundays, we have been hearing gospel lessons that prepare us for the season of Great Lent, which is still not yet, even though the West is far deep into Lent. And we've learned how God does not always work within the bounds of what we might consider religiously correct. Also, how Christ broke down barriers that separated people, reaching out to the shunned and the outcast. There were the lepers, there was Zacchaeus, there was blind Bartimaeus. Also, how his ministry frequently took place beyond the walls of holy places, where those he encountered were at times desperate or in distress. Today and next week's lessons are the introduction to the season of Great Lent. They help us to prepare even before we are even called to fast or do good works. It has to do with our state of mind and our thinking, for which these lessons are provided in what is called the Triodion, which is the book that we begin using now until Pascha, in our liturgical prayers and in the order for the readings. The jewel of today's gospel lesson, like last week's lesson of the Pharisee and the publican, is heard from St. John Climacus, who said this: "Let your prayers be simple, for both the publican, unlike the Pharisee, and the prodigal son, unlike his older brother, were both reconciled to God by a single phrase." And what were the words of these men's prayers? First, "Father, I have sinned." That's it. And the prodigal? Well, I'm sorry. "Father, I have sinned," said the prodigal. And the publican said, "God, be merciful unto me, a sinner." That was it. In fact, the Greek text of the publican's prayer uses the phrase "tu amartolo," meaning, using the definite article, "God, be merciful to me, the sinner." Not a sinner, the sinner, the sinner. It also implies that the publican may have had a relationship to the Pharisee. It is similar to the words of the Apostle Paul in his letter to Timothy, chapter 1, verse 15. They are the words that we have memorized and pray before receiving Holy Communion. You know, "I believe, O Lord, and I confess that thou art truly the Christ, the Son of the living God, who didst come into the world to save sinners, of whom I am first chief." It ironically sounds like a sinfully proud statement. But when the words are deeply confessed from the heart, as it should, it helps us to better understand the lesson of the publican and the Pharisee and today's lesson of the prodigal son. Last week, the Pharisee was described as a man who prayed about himself. And today, we are told that the prodigal son, after reaching bottom and having spent all of his inheritance, came to himself. Interesting. In every gospel parable, as we find in each of Jesus' personal encounters, there are always conversations. The lessons are about real relationships, not concepts, not ideas, or anything of one's imagination. It involves real people who were tied to real relationships in real time. Today's gospel lesson of the prodigal son is therefore a lesson that helps us to believe in a loving and merciful God and to see and understand that being at home means being in our Father's house, where we prodigals return home. For some, it may not even be returning home once, not even maybe twice, but maybe even numerous times and with someone. The teaching of the prodigal son was among Jesus' lessons that dumbfounded his listeners for a reason. His words probed the ethics and conduct of the culture and questioned the morality of personal attitudes. And if you want to go deeper, you can read my sermon on the bulletin that goes into explaining the cultural shock that this parable had for Jesus' listeners. I just want to mention this point. St. Matthew records in chapter 13 that Jesus was asked, "Why do you speak in parables?" His answer may not have satisfied his questioners. His answer was, quote, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them." Meaning, those who may have been hearers but not listeners, or to those who scoffed and mocked and even laughed at his lessons. Jesus goes on to say, quote, "Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him." Jesus said, "This is why I speak to them in parables, though seeing, they do not see, and though hearing, they do not hear or understand." Then he said, quoting Isaiah the prophet, chapter 6, 9, and 10, quote, "In them," meaning those that don't hear or listen, "in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled. They will be ever hearing but never understanding. They will be ever seeing but never perceiving, for their heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them." Jesus' use of parables often reveal an irony. However, each parable is intended to make one important point. Most importantly, we should notice Today's lesson was not about money. It was not about the inheritance that was lost. It was also not about the young man's dignity or even the time he spent away from home, abused, dejected, and humiliated. Did you hear the words of his father, who clearly and lovingly says to his eldest son, who was upset and felt unappreciated? His father's words were, quote, "You are always with me, and all I have is yours. Your brother was dead, but is alive. He was lost and is found." Now, the young man wasn't body dead, spiritually dead. This is the point. The focus of the parable, therefore, was upon what was learned, what became reunited, who was saved and restored. It highlights our freedom. It highlights that our freedom never gives us what we want, nor does it save us from ourselves and the things we accumulate or stockpile, our personal resentments even, our hurt feelings, our bitterness, and our anger. Finally, today's lesson was never meant to be the full story in time. Love is the highest of virtues. We will learn this when we learn from St. John Climacus on the 6th Sunday of Lent. It is also considered greater than faith and hope. In Metropolitan Sabba's recently published writings, which also is with a link in the Sunday bulletin, he states, listen, humility might appear to be a downward descent, but for the believers, it is an ascent to the highest and a closeness to the Lord and to creation in general. Humility is deemed to be the third to the last step for those who seek perfection. In Orthodox spirituality, humility comes right before dispassion or apatheia, and love, which are the summit of the ladder of virtues. Unquote. Next Sunday, which is called Meat Fair, we dive deeper into recognizing how personal choices matter. Also, that there is accountability and responsibility that accompanies our choices, deeds, and actions. In the third lesson of the pre-Lenten season, we will be presented with the very sober image of the last and final judgment. In that lesson, we'll be faced with recognizing that while our God is the God of love, and you've heard me say before, God is love, but love is not God, which is where our world has gone haywire. Love is not permissive. Our freedom and blessing to have choices requires accepting personal responsibility, but a responsibility that also compels us to act and to behave in ways that are an aid to us encountering and knowing Christ. Christ is in our midst.